I was 7 when my world changed forever. Before that, I was an only child, the center of my parents' quiet, modest lives. We lived in a small town near Clearwater Lake where my father Peter would take me fishing on weekends and my mother Laura would help me with school projects. They weren't the warmest parents, but they were present. I had their attention, their time, their version of love. Then came that night. I remember it vividly. Aunt Kelly burst into my room at 2 a.m., her face pale, her eyes red. She whispered, "Pack a bag, Jessica, your mother is in the hospital." My heart raced. I had never seen my aunt like this, shaken, hurried. I grabbed my small pink suitcase, stuffed it with clothes, my favorite book, and a worn-out teddy bear named Max, then stumbled into the cold night. The drive to the hospital felt like a fever dream, the hum of the tires against the road, a constant reminder that something terrible had happened. Mom had gone into labor 2 months early. My sister Olivia was coming. I didn't understand the gravity of it at the time. I just knew something was wrong. I watched from the corner of the hospital room as my mother, pale and exhausted, clutched a tiny, frail bundle to her chest. My father hovered close, his face a mix of fear and awe. I felt like a ghost standing in that sterile room, forgotten amidst the chaos. Olivia was born weighing just a few pounds, her tiny chest struggling with every breath. I wasn't allowed to touch her, to come near her. "Too fragile," they said. I watched from a distance as my parents' world narrowed around her. Every moment, every whisper, every prayer was for Olivia. When she finally came home, our house transformed. It became a bubble, a sanitized fortress, where every surface was wiped, every door handle disinfected. My mother developed an obsession with cleanliness, convinced that a single germ could mean disaster. And me, I became a risk, a potential threat. Every sneeze, every cough, every hint of illness, and I was packed off to stay with Grandma Martha or Aunt Kelly. At first I didn't mind. Grandma's house always smelled like freshly baked cookies, and Aunt Kelly had a bookshelf full of Nancy Drew mysteries. But even children are not fools. I began to understand. I wasn't being sent away for my own good. I was being exiled to protect my sister. I tried to win back their attention in every way a child knows how. I brought home perfect grades. I won my first science fair with a project on renewable energy. I taught myself to play the piano, practicing for hours in my room. Fingers aching but heart hopeful. My parents barely noticed. One year, I spent months preparing for my school's talent show, learning to play Bridge Over Troubled Water on the piano. The night of the performance, I scanned the audience, hoping to see their familiar faces. But my sister had a slight fever, 99.1 degrees, and they stayed home. 2 weeks later, the whole family, grandparents included, showed up to watch Olivia play a 15-minute flute solo, painfully off-key but celebrated as a masterpiece. I remember sitting in my room that night, fingers still stiff from hours of practice, staring at my untouched trophy. I felt like an outsider in my own home, a shadow in a family that had chosen its favorite. Over the years, I became a ghost in my own house. I took refuge in my room, surrounding myself with books about art history and antiques, my escape into a world where I felt valued. My room became my sanctuary, a place Olivia wouldn't dare enter, claiming to be allergic to my lavender air freshener. Grandma Martha became my lifeline. She noticed me. She saw my potential, encouraged my curiosity. She had an impressive collection of vintage jewelry, and over countless afternoons, she taught me the stories behind each piece, the intricate craftsmanship, the hidden hallmarks, the tales of lost love and whispered promises that these old pieces carried. Looking back, I see now that she gave me more than just her time. She gave me the seeds of a future I would one day fiercely protect. As I grew older, my parents' neglect shifted from emotional to financial. They saved nothing for my college. Every spare dollar, every family sacrifice was directed toward Olivia. I didn't even bother asking for help when the time came to apply for universities. Instead, I took the SAT alone in a crowded, noisy classroom. I applied to 15 schools without telling anyone, wrote every essay, filled out every form, and managed the financial aid paperwork myself. I scored a perfect 1,600 a feat, less than 1% of test takers achieve. I remember running home results in hand, heart pounding with pride. I burst into the kitchen holding the paper like a golden ticket. "Mom, Dad, I got a perfect SAT score." My mother, stirring a pot of soup for Olivia, barely glanced up. "That's nice, dear," she said, her eyes still on the swirling broth. Olivia, sitting at the counter, smirked. "Some of us actually have to study, you know," she muttered, flipping through her math homework. I stood there, the paper crumpling in my tightening fist, the steam from the soup rising between us like a wall. That was the day I realized I was truly alone. High school became my escape route. I knew that if I wanted a future of my own, I had to build it myself. I threw myself into my studies, joined every club that wouldn't interfere with my part-time job at Cameron's Diner, and saved every cent I earned. Carol, the diner's owner, became a mentor of sorts. She had a tough, no-nonsense attitude, but a soft heart for those willing to work hard. She noticed when my birthday rolled around, a detail my own parents often missed, and she always made sure I took home leftover pie at the end of my shift. By the time I reached my junior year, I had joined the debate team, ran for student council, and took on the role of editor-in-chief for the school newspaper. My desk at home was a fortress of color-coded notes, meticulously organized study plans, and neatly stacked textbooks. I had developed a near-obsessive attention to detail, a habit that would later prove invaluable in my career. But despite my growing list of achievements, my parents remained oblivious. My sister Olivia had moved from the flute to competitive cheerleading by then. Her room was filled with trophies, medals, and framed photos from various competitions. My own accomplishments, certificates, debate awards, perfect report cards, lay stacked in a shoebox under my bed. The defining moment came during my senior year. I had taken the SAT again, determined to outdo my previous perfect score, as if somehow a higher number would force my parents to notice me. I nailed it, another 1,600. I applied to 15 universities without telling anyone, writing each essay and filling out every financial aid form myself. I still remember the day the acceptance letters started to arrive. The first was from New York University, offering a full ride, tuition, room, board, and even a book allowance. I was so stunned I read the letter 3 times before the words sank in. I had done it. I had secured my escape. But the timing couldn't have been worse. That same day, Olivia made junior varsity cheer captain. My parents threw a small celebration, inviting family and friends to congratulate her. I came down to the kitchen, the letter clutched in my hand, heart pounding. "Dad, Mom, I have some news," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. My father glanced up from his beer, a small frown forming. "What's that, Jess?" "I got a full scholarship to NYU, full ride. I'll be moving to New York this fall." For a moment, there was silence. I felt my pulse in my ears, every second stretching into an eternity. Then Olivia, sitting across from me with her freshly curled hair and perfect makeup, burst into a high-pitched, incredulous laugh. "New York, seriously?" she snorted, flipping her hair over one shoulder. "What, to study old junk and dusty paintings?" My mother's face tightened, her eyes narrowing as if I had just announced I was moving to another planet. "Jessica," she said slowly, setting down her glass, "are you sure that's a good idea? I mean, New York is far. What if Olivia needs you? And who's going to help us with the house?" I felt the blood drain from my face. I had expected a range of reactions, pride, shock, maybe even a bit of parental hesitation. But this, I got a full ride. I stammered, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. "I won't need anything from you. I can take care of myself." Dad leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Well, if that's what you really want," he said, his tone lacking any real enthusiasm, "just don't come crying to us if things get tough." And that was it. No hug, no congratulations, no shared excitement for my future. Just a tepid acknowledgement and a return to their celebration of Olivia's latest minor achievement. That night, I packed the letter back into its envelope and shoved it under my mattress. I lay awake for hours, staring at the cracks in my ceiling, my heart heavy with the realization that even this victory, this monumental step toward independence, meant nothing to them. The summer before I left for NYU, I worked double shifts at Cameron's Diner to save up every dollar I could. Carol, the owner, became my unlikely champion, slipping me extra tips and making sure I had a hot meal before my late-night walks home. She even gave me a worn but sturdy suitcase as a parting gift, a relic from her own days of wanderlust and hard-won independence. When move-in day arrived, my parents were conveniently too busy to make the trip. It was Aunt Kelly who drove me to New York, helping me carry my bags up the narrow dorm stairwell, her eyes misty as she handed me a small envelope. "Your grandma Martha wanted you to have this," she whispered, pressing the envelope into my hand. "She's so proud of you, Jess." Later, alone in my tiny dorm room, I opened the envelope to find $500 in crisp 20s and a note written in my grandmother's shaky, familiar script. "Make them see you, Jessica. You're worth so much more than they know." I held the note to my chest, the weight of her words sinking deep into my bones. For the first time in years, I felt seen. As I unpacked my things, I made a promise to myself, a silent vow whispered to the cracked plaster walls of my new home. I would succeed. Not for them, but for me. I would make a life so undeniably rich, so fulfilling, that even my parents couldn't ignore it. And I would never ever look back. College was a breath of fresh air, a world where I could finally exist on my own terms. I dove headfirst into my studies at NYU, majoring in art history with a minor in business. It felt like the first real step toward building a life that was mine. A life not overshadowed by my sister's endless medical dramas or my parents' stifling expectations. New York City had a way of swallowing you whole, chewing you up, and spitting you out if you weren't careful. But I loved it. I thrived in the chaos, the energy, the sheer anonymity of it all. I worked late nights at a small family-owned gallery in Soho where I learned to handle everything from art appraisals to managing high-strung collectors. I developed a sharp eye for detail, honed my negotiation skills, and slowly built a network of contacts in the world of fine art and antiques. During my second year, I landed an internship at Bennett & Sons Auction House, one of the oldest and most respected firms in the city. It was a cutthroat environment filled with sharp-suited appraisers and clients who spoke in whispers about family legacies and long-lost fortunes. I felt like an outsider at first, a small-town girl with a public university background surrounded by Ivy League pedigrees, but I worked harder than anyone else, determined to prove myself. Then came the Kingston estate. It was my first major project, a massive inventory of personal belongings from a recently deceased socialite. Most of the jewelry had been dismissed as costume pieces by the more senior appraisers, but something about one brooch caught my eye. It was small and unassuming with a distinctly Art Deco design. But the weight felt off for a mere imitation, and the clasp mechanism was too intricate for a mass-produced piece. I spent hours after my shifts poring over antique jewelry guides, comparing maker's marks, and researching the Kingston family's history. I even dipped into my savings to take an online gemology course, determined to prove that this piece was something more. 2 weeks later, I finally gathered the courage to approach my boss, Mr. Harrison, a sharp-eyed, skeptical man in his late 50s who rarely looked up from his phone during meetings. "Sir," I said, placing the brooch on his desk, "I believe this piece from the Kingston collection is not costume jewelry." He barely glanced at it, already dismissing my claim. "Jessica, we've cataloged those items. They're all copies, nothing special." I took a deep breath, my heart hammering in my chest. I understand that, but I've cross-referenced the maker's marks, and this clasp design matches pieces from a limited series produced by Cartier in the 1920s. I believe it's genuine. Harrison paused, his fingers hovering over his phone screen. He finally looked up, his eyes narrowing as he examined the brooch more closely. I held my breath, every second stretching into an eternity. After what felt like an hour, he set the piece down and leaned back in his chair. "You better be right about this," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. The brooch sold at auction for $47,000, nearly 10 times the initial estimate. I didn't get a bonus, not even a formal thank you, but the respect I earned from Harrison that day was worth more than a pay raise. He started assigning me more critical appraisals, and my reputation within the company grew. By the time I graduated, I had built a small but solid reputation as someone with a keen eye for hidden treasures. I started taking on freelance work, authenticating pieces for private collectors and smaller auction houses. It was a slow, grinding process, but I loved every second of it. I was no longer just Jessica, the forgotten daughter. I was Jessica, the rising star in the world of art and antique jewelry. Then came my first real break, the Rothschild collection. It was a sprawling estate full of priceless heirlooms, the kind of project that could make or break a junior appraiser's career. I spent weeks cataloging their jewelry, meticulously inspecting every piece for hidden marks, subtle craftsmanship, and signs of age. One day, while sorting through a tangled mess of brooches and necklaces, I found it. A seemingly ordinary Art Nouveau pendant that felt heavier than it should. My pulse quickened as I examined the clasp, the fine enamel work, the tiny, almost invisible hallmark on the back. I stayed late that night, cross-referencing the marks against every database I had access to. My heart raced as the pieces fell into place. The pendant was part of a long-lost collection by a French jeweler believed to have been destroyed during World War II. When it finally went to auction, the pendant sold for $238,000, shattering expectations and solidifying my status within the industry. That night, as I walked back to my tiny, overpriced studio apartment in the East Village, I allowed myself a rare moment of pride. I had built this. I had earned this. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly independent. My parents, of course, remained blissfully ignorant of my growing success. They still thought I worked at some small antique shop in the city, a job they probably imagined involved more dusting than actual business. I let them believe it, finding a strange comfort in their ignorance. But the truth was, I had become a force in the world of high-end jewelry, a quiet but undeniable presence, carving out a life that was mine and mine alone. And the best part, I had done it without them. As the years passed, my small authentication business grew faster than I ever could have imagined. What started as a one-woman operation run from a cramped studio apartment above a Chinese restaurant had expanded into a boutique firm with offices in New York, Chicago, and Miami. I hired my first employee, Jenny, a recent gemology graduate who reminded me of a younger version of myself. Driven, meticulous, but often overlooked, she quickly became my right hand, someone I could trust to handle even the most delicate pieces. Our reputation spread through the industry. We became known as the quiet detectives of the jewelry world, the ones who could spot a genuine Cartier from a clever fake or uncover the hidden history behind a forgotten heirloom. I even started getting requests from major auction houses for second opinions, and my client list grew to include private collectors, estate managers, and high-profile art dealers. By our third year, I had moved the business into a sleek, modern office downtown, trading the constant smell of Kung Pao chicken for the subtle hum of climate-controlled display cases. We installed biometric locks, state-of-the-art security cameras, and even a custom-built vault that made Fort Knox look outdated. I was building something real, something lasting. And yet my family still thought I worked at a quaint little antique shop, probably selling dusty porcelain figurines and rusty pocket watches. I let them believe it. I had learned over the years that the less they knew about my success, the less they could undermine it. I still visited them occasionally out of a sense of duty more than anything else. Sunday dinners were a surreal experience, a performance of normalcy in a family that had long since forgotten how to see each other clearly. My mother Laura would ask about my little shop, in the same breath she used to praise Olivia for her latest, usually trivial achievements. "Oh, Jessica," she would say, passing me the overcooked pot roast, "how's the antique shop? Are you doing okay financially? You know, if you ever need help, just let us know." I would smile politely, biting back the urge to tell her about the six-figure commissions I had closed that month. Instead, I would mumble something non-committal about managing just fine, watching as Olivia dominated the conversation with tales of her latest TikTok videos and cheerleading stunts. One particular Sunday, I wore a vintage Cartier bracelet to dinner, a piece I had recently authenticated for a client. It was a stunning piece, delicate yet powerful, a true work of art. Olivia, sitting across from me, spent 20 minutes gushing about the $200 watch she had bought on sale at a department store, completely oblivious to the fact that the bracelet on my wrist was worth more than her car. I felt a strange, bitter satisfaction in those moments, a private victory that no one else at the table could see. It became a game for me, slipping priceless pieces into my outfits, testing whether anyone in my family would notice. They never did. But the real challenge came when I started sending my parents money. It started small, an anonymous $500 here, $1,000 there, payments to help cover their mortgage, Olivia's endless student loans, and the medical bills they had quietly accumulated over the years. They assumed the money came from Aunt Kelly, or perhaps a forgotten life insurance policy from a distant relative. When my father mentioned one evening that they were struggling to keep up with Olivia's private college tuition, I quietly doubled the amount, transferring $5,000 each month without a word. It wasn't just out of guilt, it was a way of buying my freedom, a way to keep them at arm's length while still fulfilling my perceived family duty. But even as I built my empire, my parents remained blissfully ignorant of the scale of my success. They continued to dismiss my career as a cute hobby, something they assumed I would eventually outgrow or fail at. And Olivia. She continued to thrive in her carefully curated bubble of Instagram filters and cheerleading competitions, blissfully unaware of the life I was building just a few states away. Then came the Bancroft collection, a game-changing opportunity that would push my firm into the global spotlight. It was one of the largest private jewelry collections on the East Coast, a treasure trove of pieces dating back to the Gilded Age, many of which had never been seen by the public. I spent weeks preparing for the initial appraisal, combing through old auction catalogs, researching the family's history, and building a case for why this collection could be worth millions. It felt like everything I had worked for was finally coming together, the culmination of years of quiet dedication and tireless effort. The day I walked into the Bancroft estate, a sprawling mansion perched on the cliffs of the Hudson River, I felt the weight of my past fall away. I was no longer the invisible daughter, the forgotten sister. I was Jessica, a respected expert in my field, a self-made woman, a force to be reckoned with. As I ran my gloved fingers over a diamond necklace that had once graced the neck of a Gilded Age socialite, I allowed myself a moment of quiet pride. This was my world now, a world I had built brick by brick, appraisal by appraisal, without a single word of encouragement from the family that had once made me feel so small. But as I would soon discover, secrets have a way of surfacing, and the world I had worked so hard to build was about to collide violently with the one I had left behind. The confrontation I had unknowingly been building toward for years finally came on a chilly Thanksgiving afternoon. It started with a simple, almost forgettable mistake. I had left my laptop open in my old bedroom while visiting my parents for the holiday. Dinner had been tense as always. My mother fussed over the dry turkey while Olivia bragged about her latest TikTok follower milestone, tossing her newly highlighted hair over one shoulder like a pageant queen. I barely touched my plate, my mind still on a critical auction happening in Hong Kong that I needed to monitor later. As dessert was being served, a store-bought pumpkin pie that my mother had somehow managed to overcook, Olivia disappeared upstairs, her phone in hand, probably looking for better Wi-Fi to update her social media feed. I should have seen it coming. I should have remembered that Olivia never respected boundaries, that to her, every locked door, every closed laptop, every whispered conversation was just another challenge. When she returned to the dining room, she had my laptop clutched in her perfectly manicured hands, a strange, almost predatory smile on her lips. "Hey everyone," she called out, raising her voice to cut through the clinking of plates and forced laughter. "You all might want to see this." Every head turned, my heart sank. Olivia flipped my laptop around the screen, facing the room full of aunts, uncles, and cousins. My stomach twisted as I realized what she had found, my business accounts open and displaying a snapshot of my financial life. Current account balance, $13.4 million. Pending authentication contract, $485,000. Recent transaction, $1.2 million. Year-to-date profit, $4.2 million. For a moment, there was absolute stunned silence. The only sound was the soft ticking of the antique clock I had given my parents for their 30th anniversary, a genuine Tiffany piece I had authenticated myself, but which my mother had always assumed was a reproduction. Then Olivia's face twisted, her carefully painted expression cracking as she processed what she was seeing. She stumbled back a step, nearly dropping the laptop. This can't be right," she stammered, her voice trembling. "Jessica, you're rich." I felt every eye in the room turn toward me, the weight of their collective shock pressing down like a vice. My mother's face flushed an angry shade of red. She set her fork down with a clatter, her hands trembling. "Jessica," she hissed, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "What is this? How can you have this much money and never say a word? We've been struggling to support Olivia through college and you're just sitting on millions." I slowly rose from my seat, the blood pounding in my ears. I could feel years of resentment, of silent sacrifices and overlooked achievements boiling up inside me, threatening to explode. "Struggling," I repeated, my voice calm but icy. "I've been sending you $5,000 a month for the past 3 years. I covered Olivia's last hospital bill. I paid off the second mortgage you took out to remodel this house. You didn't think to question where all that money was coming from." My father, who had been uncharacteristically silent up to this point, suddenly looked like he had been punched in the gut. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, his jaw working as he tried to process this new reality. But why?" my mother sputtered, her eyes wild, darting between my father and me, as if hoping someone would offer a more palatable explanation. "Because I felt obligated." I snapped, my control slipping. "Because for years I convinced myself that maybe, just maybe, if I supported you financially, you'd finally see me. You'd finally acknowledge my success, my sacrifices. But no, every dollar I sent just fed into your endless worship of Olivia, your perfect, fragile little princess." Olivia, her face pale, her carefully curated Instagram life unraveling before her eyes, began to cry, a high-pitched gasping sound that grated on my already frayed nerves. "This isn't fair," she shrieked, slamming the laptop shut and tossing it onto the dining room table. "You should have told us. You should have shared. I have student loans, medical bills. You owe us." I felt something snap inside me, a final brittle thread of restraint that had held me back for too long. "I owe you?" I repeated, my voice rising despite my best efforts to stay calm. "I owe you nothing. I built this life from nothing without a single word of encouragement from any of you. While you were all too busy fawning over Olivia, I was out there hustling, working 80-hour weeks, living off ramen and cheap coffee, building something real. I did this on my own, and I don't owe you a damn thing." The room fell into a stunned silence. My mother's face had turned a sickly shade of gray, her hands gripping the edge of the table as if to keep from collapsing. My father stared at his wine glass, the light from the chandelier reflecting off the crystal, his eyes hollow. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and picked up my car keys from the side table. "I'm done," I said, my voice steady, my heart strangely calm. "I'm done trying to buy your approval, your respect. You can keep your perfect daughter and your perfect family dinners. I'm moving on." With that, I turned on my heel and walked out the front door, the cold November air hitting my face like a slap. I climbed into my car, the engine growling to life beneath me, and pulled away from the house that had never truly felt like home. As I drove down the dark, winding road back to the city, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to smile. Story 2. I never thought the people I helped raise would one day ask me for $1 and $300 just to walk through their front door. I'm not exaggerating. That's exactly what happened. And if you had told me even a few years ago that my own stepson and his wife would treat me like a stranger at their housewarming party, I would have laughed it off. But this isn't a joke. This is exactly how things went down. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Linda. I'm 56 and I've lived a fairly ordinary life until recently. I've been married to my husband Tom for 23 years. He has a son, Eric, from a previous marriage. Eric's mom passed when he was young, and I raised him like he was my own. There was no step in how I saw him. I cooked his meals, helped with homework, sat through school plays, paid for braces, everything. And Tom, he worked hard to provide but was rarely home. It was me and Eric most of the time. For years I thought we had a solid bond. He even called me Mom without hesitation. But everything changed after Eric got married. His wife Hannah also worked at the small family-run company where Tom and I were both in mid-level roles. At first I was hopeful. Hannah was confident, polished, and charming in a way that made people overlook the cracks. I tried to connect with her, even welcomed her into our home when they asked to move in during her pregnancy. That's where the spiral began. See, Hannah didn't handle pregnancy well, and I don't mean the physical symptoms. She hated the way her body was changing. She became obsessed with it. Every night she'd weigh herself, cry, and lash out at Eric. Eventually he came to me in tears saying he couldn't handle it anymore. "Please, Mom," he said, "can we move in for a while, just until the baby's born?" Of course I said yes. I should have asked more questions. As soon as they moved in, Hannah started treating our home like some rundown motel. "This place is so old and drafty," she said on day one. "I'd rather live in a small apartment than in this antique." Tom's grandfather built our house. It's not flashy, but it has history, warmth, character. That didn't matter to her. What mattered was control. Within a week, she had me cooking every meal and vacuuming twice a day. "Can you clean the guest room properly? I don't want any dust near the baby," she'd say, standing behind me like a supervisor. I bit my tongue. She was pregnant. I told myself she was hormonal, overwhelmed, not herself. Then she gave birth, and instead of getting better, it got worse. She and Eric completely checked out, left the baby with me constantly. Daytime, I was the default babysitter. Nights, they'd dump him on me, saying they needed sleep. They'd go out shopping, drinking, even took weekend trips while I stayed home bottle feeding and rocking a newborn. Tom passed away unexpectedly about a month after the baby was born. A car accident. He was coming back from a late shift at work, and just like that, gone. We had the funeral. Family came and went, but Hannah, she didn't even attend. Said she was too exhausted. When I got home, she was sprawled out on the living room sofa, sipping juice and watching reality TV. "Gotta admit," she said without looking at me, "it's kind of nice with him gone. The house feels less crowded." I should have said something then, but I was too stunned. Eric, who I assumed would say something, anything, just nodded and said, "It's true." He was barely ever around anyway. I buried my husband and came home to people who treated it like a snow day. Over the next year, things only got worse. They mocked me behind my back, or sometimes to my face. Hannah even said once, "I heard you're not Eric's real mom." That makes a lot more sense. Still, I stayed. Not for them, for my grandson. He was innocent in all this. And despite being treated like their free nanny, I loved him. I still do. But after years of this, they hit a new low. One day out of nowhere, Eric and Hannah announced they were buying a house. "We're tired of this creaky old place," Hannah said. "We're building something fresh, something worthy of our status." They moved out a few months later. I was relieved, honestly. I figured it was finally over. that I could grieve Tom in peace and focus on my work without being barked at like a maid. Then came the housewarming. I found out through a coworker that they were hosting a big event at the new house. Fancy invite-only thing. I wasn't invited, but I thought maybe it was just a mistake. Maybe they assumed I'd just show up anyway, being mom and all. So I went, with a small plant and a bottle of wine in hand. When I got there, the place was packed. Hannah's friends, her family, photographers, catering. It was like a wedding. I walked up to the front gate, smiled at Eric, and said, "Thought I'd stop by for a bit, check out the new place." He didn't smile back. Instead, Hannah came up beside him smirking. "You want to come in?" "Yes." "Well," she said, tilting her head, "since you're not family, we're charging a $1 $300 entry fee." I blinked. "What?" "Housewarming fundraiser," she said. "For real guests only." I looked at Eric. He just looked away. I put the wine and plant down on the driveway. "Okay then," I said, calm as ever. "I'll go." As I turned to walk away, they laughed. Actually laughed, like they'd won something. I didn't say another word. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I went home. And then I went straight to the bank. 3 days later, they were banging on my door. 3 days. That's how long it took before Eric and Hannah showed up at my door in a panic. I was just finishing my morning coffee when I heard shouting from the porch, familiar voices, loud and unhinged. "What the hell, Mom?" Eric banged on the screen door hard enough to rattle it. "Why is our account empty?" I stepped outside, mug in hand, still wearing my slippers. "You need to calm down," I said, keeping my voice low. "The neighbors don't want to hear this." Hannah stood behind him, arms crossed, looking more feral than polished. "Don't lecture us. What did you do to our bank account?" I took a sip of coffee before answering. "It's not your account, it's mine. It always has been. I just moved the money, that's all." "What do you mean, moved?" Eric's voice cracked. "We need that money. That's our mortgage, our bills, our everything." I nodded. "Exactly. And now you'll start paying for it yourselves." They stood there frozen. I could see the reality slowly sinking in. Because here's what they'd forgotten. While they lived in my house, ate my food, left their baby with me, day and night, they were also using my bank account. Not their own, mine. Every grocery run, every outfit, every spa visit Hannah posted about on Instagram, my debit card. The down payment for their new home me. I never thought twice about it at the time. I'd always tried to do right by Eric even though we didn't share blood. I'd raised him like a son because that's what you do when you love someone, especially when their birth mother is gone. But after Tom died and their behavior got worse, I started thinking about all those years differently. About the years I spent cleaning up after 2 grown adults. About the baby I raised while they went clubbing. About the way Hannah laughed in my face and called me a stranger. I thought about what Tom would have said. He told me once, not long before he passed, "If anything happens to me, don't let them walk over you. Cut ties if you need to. Eric's not the boy he used to be. And Hannah, she's poison." At the time, I'd brushed it off, but I remembered every word. So when I got home from that housewarming disaster, I opened my drawer, took out the folder with my banking info, and called the branch manager, the same one who'd known Tom for years. "I want to lock this down," I told her. "Transfer everything, remove any linked cards, freeze joint activity." She didn't ask why. So yes, Eric and Hannah's life flipped upside down 3 days later. And watching them squirm on my porch, I can't lie, I didn't feel guilty. Is that all I asked? Because if you're done yelling, I've got laundry to do. Eric grabbed the door frame like he might try to force his way in. "You can't just shut us out. You've always helped. You owe us." I looked him dead in the eye. "Actually, no, I don't. And you owe me more than you'll ever admit." I started to go back inside but paused and looked over my shoulder. "Oh, and since you're not family, there's a $1 $300 fee to enter this property now. You understand, right?" They didn't say a word. They left without another sound. I thought maybe, just maybe, that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The next day they were back. This time it was a different act. "Good morning, Mom," Hannah chirped like she hadn't told me to stay out of her house. "You look amazing today. Did you do something different with your hair?" She had the nerve to bring me a tiny bouquet of gas station flowers and a cheap coffee. "Let's not fight," she said, trying to push her way into the house. "We were all a little stressed the other day." Behind her, Eric added, "We just want to move forward as a family." I let the door stay closed between us. I kept my face blank. "You're not coming in," I said simply. They looked stunned. "I'm not going to pretend that everything is fine," I continued. "And if you think I'll give you another cent, you're wasting your time." Hannah's smile vanished. "We respected you for years. Don't act like you were some kind of saint." "Respected me. I repeated. You called me a stranger at your house. You told me to pay to come in. You laughed while you slammed the door in my face. Don't rewrite history now. Eric muttered, she's being dramatic. That's when Hannah snapped. You know what, fine. If you want to act like some kind of big-shot matriarch, go ahead. Just remember when you die, he gets it all anyway. I couldn't help it. I laughed. Laughed so hard it startled them both. Sweetheart, I said. You really think there's an inheritance coming your way? Eric blinked. I'm your son. You're not my legal son, I said flatly. I never adopted you. You have no claim to my estate. What are you talking about? You want to inherit something, you'd need a will or adoption paperwork. I've done neither. And after what you've done, I've filed a non-acceptance declaration. You can't even petition to be adopted without my consent now. I watched their faces shift from fury to confusion to shock. It was over, but they still didn't leave. They stood there fuming until I reached for my phone. You don't want me to call the cops, I said, but I will. This is private property, and last I checked, trespassing strangers aren't allowed past my porch. Hannah swore and kicked over a potted plant on her way out. Eric shouted something about me being a bitter old woman. I let them go. I cleaned up the plant. Then I took a deep breath that felt like the first one in years. That should have been the end. But of course, people like that don't crash quietly. It didn't take long before I started hearing things through coworkers and neighbors. Eric lost his job. Turns out he tried to skim funds from the company to cover their mounting credit card debt. Hannah kept spending like nothing had changed, convinced the money would keep coming. It didn't. They couldn't keep up with the mortgage on their new house. They started missing payments. Hannah's car got repossessed. And then the final blow, Eric found out the baby wasn't his. The one I'd raised. The one I'd stayed quiet for. The one I'd held at 2 a.m. while they partied. Not his. Hannah had cheated early in their marriage, and somehow the truth came out during the mess of their financial unraveling. Divorce papers hit next. It got ugly. There were lawyers, restraining orders, screaming matches in the middle of the street. All I could think was this was never about the money. It was about respect. They had none. They took what they could for as long as they could, and when the faucet stopped flowing, they turned on me like I was the villain. But I never fought them. I never raised my voice. I just stopped giving. That's all it took, and in the silence that followed, they crumbled on their own. These days, my life is calm, peaceful. I still live in the same old house, the one they hated so much. I fixed up the garden, added new windows, painted the porch. It feels like mine again. I kept working at the family company after Tom passed, and since I've had more time to focus, I've taken on more leadership there. People have noticed. The younger staff come to me for advice. Some even call me the backbone of the office. I never asked for that title, but it feels earned. Every evening I light a candle by Tom's photo in the living room and tell him what's new. I like to think he sees it all, that he's proud I finally stood my ground. Because some people never see your value until you stop giving it away. And once you do, you don't have to raise your voice or throw a punch. You just have to close the door. It's been over a year since I closed the door on Eric and Hannah. I haven't seen either of them since that day on the porch. No more pop-up visits. No more texts begging for money. No more fake smiles or twisted guilt trips. The silence has been healing. People talk about closure like it comes in one big moment, like a speech or a slam of the door or some dramatic final act. But for me, it came slow. It came in the morning stillness when no one was yelling through the house. In the quiet hum of my coffee maker. In the sound of my own breath not catching every time the phone rang. Peace doesn't arrive with a bang. It tiptoes in. One day I caught myself humming while folding laundry, and I realized I hadn't thought about them all morning. That's when I knew I was finally moving on. About 3 months after Eric lost his job, I started getting calls from mutual acquaintances. Not friends, people we knew through work or community events. People who like to stay neutral. Linda, I heard Eric and Hannah are going through a rough patch. Maybe you could reach out. Or worse, they're family. At the end of the day, blood is blood. I don't know who decided that DNA automatically meant forgiveness. I always kept my responses short. They made their choices, I'm making mine. That usually ended the conversation. But one woman pushed. She was someone from our church, someone who'd always tried to play peacemaker. You raised him, she said. Doesn't that count for something? It counted when it mattered, I said. But love is not a bank account. You can't withdraw from it forever without ever putting something in. She didn't call again. What I didn't tell people, what I didn't even tell Rachel, my closest friend, was that I still thought about the baby. The child I fed and rocked to sleep. The one I sang lullabies to while his parents partied. He wasn't mine, Not by blood, not even by law, and apparently not even Eric's. But in those early months of his life, he clung to me like I was his whole world. That kind of bond, it leaves a mark. Sometimes I wonder where he is now, who he's with, if he's safe, if he still cries the way he used to with that hiccupy little wail that always broke my heart. I'll probably never know, and I've had to accept that. Some ties, no matter how deep they feel, aren't ours to keep. Professionally, things blossomed. The company Tom and I worked for, his brother's business, wasn't huge, but it was solid. After Tom passed, I kept showing up. Not just on time, but present, committed. Eventually, people noticed. When the head of operations retired, the board offered me the role. I didn't campaign for it. I didn't lobby. I just kept doing my job with care and clarity, and that was enough. I took the position, but not for status. I did it for the team. The younger women especially needed to see someone like me at the table. Not polished, not loud, but steady. We made some changes. Better parental leave. More support for caretakers. Fairer pay audits. I don't think Tom would have seen all this coming, but I think he'd be proud. One Friday evening, I was locking up the office when I saw Eric standing in the parking lot. For a moment, I didn't move. He looked different, thinner, tired. The polished arrogance he used to wear like a second skin was gone. In its place was something closer to silence. He didn't speak until I reached my car. "Hey," he said, voice low, "I know I shouldn't be here." I nodded, "But you are." He looked at the ground. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I didn't answer. He looked up. "You were the only person who ever treated me like I mattered. You didn't have to. You chose to." And he stopped, swallowed. I threw it away. The wind picked up a little, lifting the edges of his worn jacket. I finally spoke. "You didn't just hurt me, Eric. You used me, mocked me, laughed in my face. That's not something a single apology can erase." "I know," he said quickly. "I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to hear it from me." I nodded again. "Thank you." He took a step back. "I'll go." Then he paused. "The boy, he's with his real dad now. They moved out of state. I haven't seen him since the hearing." I didn't ask for details. I just said I hope he's safe. Eric stood there for a second longer, then turned and walked away. I watched him go, and I didn't feel triumph. I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not even relief. Just stillness. That to me was freedom. The holidays came and went. I spent Thanksgiving with a friend from work and her two little girls, who made me handmade thank you cards and insisted I sit in the middle of their couch fort. Christmas was quieter. I put up the tree alone for the first time in years. It should have been sad, but it wasn't. I played old records, drank cider, and told stories to Tom's photo like I always did. I told him the house was finally peaceful, that the walls didn't echo anymore, that the air was soft. I told him I missed him. That part never changes. In the spring, I built a small garden in the backyard. Just tomatoes, herbs, and some wildflowers. Nothing fancy. But watching something grow from nothing, that felt good. On warm days, I sit out there in the early morning, barefoot on the stone path, sipping coffee. Sometimes I read. Sometimes I just listen to the birds. Sometimes I say a prayer I never finish. That's enough. People still ask me about Eric sometimes. I just say we're not in touch, and I leave it at that. I don't talk about the housewarming, or the bank account, or the way he and Hannah tore through my life like a storm. That part of the story is closed. It's not erased, but it's no longer the center. Because the center now is this: I survived it. I came out the other side stronger, clearer, and quieter. Not bitter. Just free. I don't know what comes next. Maybe I'll retire in a few years. Maybe I'll travel. Maybe I'll adopt a dog and finally fix the leaky porch roof. All I know is that I'm done giving myself to people who only take. And if anyone ever knocks on my door again asking for something I'm not willing to give, well, I'll just remind them. There's a $1 $300 entrance fee for strangers. Story 3. You ever have one of those moments where someone you love looks you in the eye and shows you exactly who they are? Mine came on a Tuesday morning over burnt coffee and an awkward smile. 30 days, my mother said, twirling her travel mug like she was hosting some kind of real estate game show. "We sold your place to Megan." No preamble, no soft landing. Just that smug look she always wore when she thought she'd outplayed someone. I stared at her, blinking once. My mother, my brother Kyle, and Megan, his wife, all standing in my kitchen, all somehow acting like this was normal. We figured, Kyle added, slinging his arm around Megan's shoulders. "You don't really use this apartment much anymore, right? Always working those catering events, always traveling. It just makes sense." That was his favorite phrase. It just makes sense. The excuse he'd used since we were kids for taking whatever he wanted, my bike, my room, my birthday spotlight. Now apparently my apartment. Megan said nothing, but her hand ghosted over the swell of her stomach like it was a shield. The baby. Right. That had become the universal pass in my family. Pregnancy equaled priority. And Kyle, he was the golden son, the golden father-to-be, the center of the orbit, and the rest of us were expected to revolve. I didn't yell, I didn't scream, I just set down my coffee. And I smiled. Because they had no idea what I knew. My name's Rachel Donnelly. I'm 34. I run a boutique catering company, and I've lived in this apartment for over a decade. It's not just a home, it's where I built everything. This kitchen. It's where I launched Donnelly Catering with nothing but a borrowed mixer and a menu I sketched on napkins. This guest room, it was my grandmother's hospice room. I held her hand here during her last breath. This place has my history in the floorboards, but that's not what gave me peace in that moment. What gave me peace was knowing I wasn't just standing in my apartment. I was standing in my building. It had started 3 years earlier. My grandmother Mabel Donnelly was sharper than anyone gave her credit for. While my parents were busy trying to charm her into revising her will, she was quietly handling her affairs with a kind of ruthless precision. I trust you, she told me one night over chamomile tea, and I know your mother's going to come sniffing around as soon as I'm gone. So here, she handed me a sealed envelope. Don't open it until you have to. I kept that envelope in the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet under old tax returns and client contracts. It stayed there untouched until this exact moment. Actually, I said, turning to head toward my home office, there's something you should see. I came back with a folder aged dog-eared and still sealed in its original notary band. When I set it down on the counter, my mother's smirk cracked ever so slightly. Before we talk about me moving out, I said, sliding it across the marble, you might want to take a look at this. My mother's hands trembled as she broke the seal. Kyle leaned in. Megan stayed frozen, probably praying this wasn't what it looked like. It was. Signed, dated, notarized, full legal ownership of both the apartment I lived in and the vacant unit next door. Transferred directly to me, with an attached letter from Mabel herself. You lied, my mother hissed, her voice going brittle. I just shrugged. You assumed, I just didn't correct you. What followed was a blur of sputtering rage and Kyle pacing like a trapped animal. Megan sat down, pale and nauseated. My mother demanded to know how I could betray them. Me, the woman who'd spent the last 5 years taking care of a dying parent while they went on cruises. I let them talk, rant, accuse. Then I handed Kyle a rental application. There's a unit available, next door, same layout, market rate. Let me know by Friday. You expect me to pay you, he spat. No, I said calmly. I expect you to figure it out like an adult. My mother's eyes narrowed. You've changed. No, I said. You just finally saw me clearly. After they left, the apartment was so quiet it almost echoed. I stood in the kitchen where my grandmother used to sit, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug, and I imagined her smirking the way she used to when someone played themselves. Always let people reveal themselves first, she used to say, then decide how loud your silence needs to be. I opened the drawer where I'd kept her envelope. Tucked inside was her final note. Legacy isn't about control, it's about clarity. You're clear now. Let that be enough. I didn't cry, I just exhaled. Then I got to work. Because letting someone think they've won when they've actually just walked into checkmate, that's its own kind of poetry. They didn't call the next day. Not that I expected them to. My family operates like a bad PR firm, deny, delay, then deflect. When they realize they can't control the narrative, they go radio silent. But silence has a sound, a weight, and by day 3 it was loud. That's when the texts started. From my father first. Always the cleanup crew. Your mother is upset. She feels blindsided. We were just trying to help Kyle start his family. I was elbow deep in whipped ganache for a wedding cake when I read it. I didn't respond, just kept whisking. 10 minutes later, a follow-up. We need to talk about what happens next. I let that one rot too. By the end of the week, I'd counted 4 missed calls, 6 passive-aggressive group chat messages, and a very pointed comment from my mom's Facebook about entitled people forgetting who raised them. I made a note to remove her as admin from the old family photo albums. On Sunday, someone knocked at the door. It was Megan, alone. She looked different, smaller without Kyle by her side, or maybe just more herself. I know I should have called, she said, holding a white pastry box like a peace treaty. I brought the apple tarts, the ones you used to eat when you were stressed. I stepped aside and let her in. The box smelled like cinnamon and resignation. She perched on the edge of the stool, both hands curled around her belly like it was keeping her grounded. I didn't know, she said. I didn't say anything, just leaned on the counter waiting. About the deed, about any of it. Kyle told me your parents had signed the apartment over, said it was a done deal, a gift really. I asked if you were okay with it and he said yes. That tracks, I said softly. She looked at me, eyes rimmed in guilt. I should have asked you myself. I exhaled slowly. Not angry, just tired. Yeah, you should have. She nodded, brushing her bangs behind her ears like she used to when she first started dating Kyle, nervous, eager to please, apologizing for taking up space. They always made me feel like I had to agree to keep the peace, she whispered, even when it didn't feel right. I tilted my head, and now, I want something that's mine. Really mine. She looked around the apartment like she was seeing it for the first time, not as something to take, but as a reminder. I heard there's a vacant unit next door. There is. I'd like to rent it, she said, voice steady. Fair price, clean lease, no drama. No running back to my mom to report every detail. She shook her head. Not anymore. I studied her for a long moment. You're sure this isn't Kyle talking? I didn't even tell him I was coming. I believed her. By Tuesday we had a lease signed. Standard terms. Market rate, first month free while I renovated. I emailed her a few finish options, flooring, cabinet styles, paint. She chose warm wood and soft sage, the kind of palette that said she was thinking beyond appearances now. When I mentioned it casually to my property manager, he said, "She's the first family tenant you've taken in, right?" I nodded. Brave. Or stupid, he smiled. Time will tell. That Friday, my mother sent a group message titled "Family Meeting Required." She'd always been big on caps lock when she wanted to sound in control. The message was short. They were holding the meeting at their place, Sunday afternoon. Important updates about the family trust and property situation. I wasn't planning to go, until Megan called me late that night. They're planning to contest the deed, she said in a whisper. I overheard Kyle talking to your dad's lawyer. They're claiming your grandmother wasn't of sound mind when she signed the documents. I sat in my office staring at the moonlight spilling across my desk. She was sharper than all of them combined. I know, Megan said, but they think they can spin it. They can try. She was quiet for a beat. Then I'll be there Sunday. And I'm not sitting with them. Sunday arrived with cool air and fake smiles. My parents' house was as over-decorated as ever, framed platitudes on the wall, throw pillows no one actually used. Everyone was there. Kyle pacing, my mom perched in her usual throne of a chair, my dad standing behind her like backup. Megan sat alone. I stayed standing. My mom opened her mouth first. We've spoken to our attorney. Given the suspicious timing of your grandmother's changes, there are questions about her state of mind and about your influence. You mean the influence where I bathed her, fed her, managed her meds while you were off in Hawaii? My dad winced. Kyle jumped in. You manipulated her. Took advantage of her trust. Megan stirred. That's not true. His head whipped around. What? I was there too, Kyle. I saw Rachel take care of her. I saw how lucid she was. Your story doesn't match reality. The room went still. My mother's lips tightened. Megan, sweetheart, you don't understand. No, she cut in. I do. I've understood for a while now. I just didn't want to see it. My heart twisted a little. Not in pain, in recognition, in the ache of someone waking up. I stepped forward. Before you go any further, I said, let me save you some legal fees. I pulled a flash drive from my bag and plugged it into the TV. A video played, grainy but clear. My grandmother sitting at her kitchen table laughing softly. I know what they'll say, that I was confused, but I'm not. I'm old, not stupid. She signed the papers slowly, clearly explaining her choices into the camera. I'm giving the buildings to Rachel because she earned them, because she shows up, and because she understands that legacy isn't about entitlement, it's about stewardship. The video ended. Silence. Then I looked at my father. Still want to contest that? He rubbed a hand over his face and sat down, hard. My mother muttered something about needing air and left the room. Kyle. He stormed out without a word. Only Megan stayed. She reached over and took my hand. They didn't expect anyone to choose you. I know, I said. They're not used to anyone standing up to them. Well, she said, giving my hand a squeeze, they'd better get used to it. Later that night, I sat on my fire escape watching the city glow. My grandmother's words echoed in my mind. Let them dig their hole. You just keep building your house. It wasn't just a metaphor anymore. It was bricks and paint swatches and flower boxes outside Megan's future window. I didn't win. I just stayed standing when they expected me to fall. And sometimes that's all it takes. 6 months passed. The lawsuits never came. They made threats, sure, Whispered ones, lawyer-written ones, half-baked ones buried in guilt-flavored emails. But the moment they saw the video of Grandma, clear-eyed, deliberate, sharper than any of them, they backed off. Not because they believed me, but because the law did. And when you've spent your whole life controlling people with fear, the moment that fear stops working, you get quiet, real quiet. Megan moved into the apartment next door in late March. The renovations came out better than either of us imagined. Warm oak floors, open shelves in the kitchen, sage green walls in the nursery. Her belly was round by then. She waddled through the space, slowly smiling at the sunlight pouring in through the east-facing windows. "I forgot what it feels like to make a choice and not feel ashamed of it," she said one morning, sipping chamomile tea on my balcony. I looked over at her. "You didn't forget, you just weren't allowed to remember." We were quiet after that, but the good kind. The kind that fills you instead of swallowing you. Kyle took it personally. At first he tried everything to change her mind. Flowers, promises, even tears. But when Megan stayed firm, he did what he always does. Sulk, deflect, and finally disappear. He moved in with a friend across town. Took a job he actually had to show up for. Megan said he was still adjusting to things like time cards and pay stubs. Real life has a way of humbling people who used to coast on charm. They don't talk much now. She lets him visit the baby on her terms. And me? I became the villain in his story. I'm fine with that. The rest of the family started unraveling too. My mom's silence turned into absence. She stopped sending messages, stopped showing up at gatherings. Rumor has it she's been telling relatives I manipulated Grandma in her final days, that I used my influence to take what wasn't mine. I used to care. Now I don't even flinch. My father eventually reached out months after the meeting. His message was short. "I'd like to talk if you're open to it. Not about the buildings, just us." I haven't answered yet. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. Some wounds need silence to scar properly. Meanwhile, the buildings thrived. Under my management, we filled every unit with people who wanted to build something. There's Mrs. Campos, who opened a tiny tailoring studio on the corner. Every hem she sews carries stories from weddings, interviews, quinceañeras. There's Sam and Leo, who live in the attic unit with their rescue dog and just launched a graphic design studio out of their spare room. And there's Megan, who once the baby came, started her own small flower business from the second bedroom. Arrangements for local cafes, weddings, even funerals. She called it Rooted. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. One afternoon in May, I found a letter on my doormat. No envelope, just folded carefully. It was from Megan. "You gave me more than a place to live. You gave me a life I forgot I was allowed to want. Thank you for not shutting the door even when you could have locked it." I sat on my steps with the letter in my lap, watching the baby monitor flicker through Megan's open window across the courtyard. The breeze smelled like lilacs and bread baking. My grandmother would have loved this moment. The baby was born in early April, a girl. They named her Clara. I cried when I held her for the first time. Not big sobbing tears, just a quiet stream while I rocked her and felt her tiny fingers wrap around mine. "You're going to grow up in a home built on truth," I whispered. "That's all I wanted." Lisa, Megan's middle name, the one she started going by again, told me I was Clara's godmother. I didn't say anything, just nodded. My voice wouldn't work. We threw the baby shower at my place. Yes, my mother was invited. No, she didn't show up, but my aunt did. And my cousin from Chicago. And neighbors who brought tamales, quiches, hand-knit blankets. It felt less like a baby shower and more like a reintroduction to something I hadn't believed in for a while: chosen family. People who saw you. People who stayed. The apartment I once fought to protect, it's still mine. But it doesn't feel like a fortress anymore, or a trophy. It feels like a starting point, a root system. I host Sunday dinners, now rotating menus, candlelit tables, laughter that echoes through both buildings. And sometimes after everyone leaves, I sit in Grandma's old rocking chair by the window. I sip mint tea and read her letters again, the ones I've saved in a box beneath my bed. One of them says, "They'll call you selfish when you stop shrinking. Let them. The world was never meant to be inherited. It's meant to be rebuilt." I get it now. Kyle still sends the occasional angry email. My mother still pretends she's the victim. But their noise doesn't reach me anymore. I'm too busy living a life I built with bare hands and quiet choices. There was never a scene, never a screaming match. Just a line drawn in solid oak floors. A contract signed in ink. A camera that caught the truth before it could be rewritten. They thought they could corner me with guilt and tradition. They forgot I had the deeds. Now on clear mornings, I walk the block with my coffee and watch the neighborhood bloom. The buildings stand tall, weathered but proud, just like Grandma. And me, I am not broken, I am not bitter. I am busy. Busy growing, busy managing, busy cooking, busy tending to the life they once tried to sell like a hand-me-down. My revenge wasn't loud. It didn't come with fireworks or door slams. It came in the form of keys jingling on my ring, rent checks arriving on time, neighbors sharing recipes, and a baby born into a home where no one would tell her to be smaller. Sometimes when I think about how it all unfolded, I smile to myself and remember the line Grandma wrote at the end of her last letter. They thought legacy meant power. I left you something stronger. Ownership. She was right, and I've carried that truth like a torch ever since. They tried to evict me from my own life. I let them pack the boxes. Then I unpacked the future they never saw coming. And this time the front door is mine.